The silence in the high hall of the Valosian Ascendancy was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a heavy, oppressive tapestry woven from 10,000 years of unquestioned dominance. Here, beneath the vaulted ceiling of crystalline arches that soared high enough to trap their own weather systems, the air smelled of ozone, polished electrum, and the stale, recycled fear of 1,000 conquered species. High Exarch Valen sat upon the throne of unity, a seat carved from the single, massive tooth of a void leviathan his ancestors had slain before the invention of the hyperdrive, and he felt the familiar, dull ache of absolute power settling behind his compound eyes. The light in the chamber was dim, filtered through the violet atmospheric shields that protected the tower from the harsh radiation of the binary suns outside, casting long, bruised shadows that stretched across the obsidian floor like the grasping fingers of ghosts. Valen was old, his carapace fading from the brilliant, iridescent emerald of his youth to a dull, stately olive, and he had seen civilizations rise and fall with the detachment of a geologist watching sand shift in a desert. But today, the silence was different. It was not the reverent silence of subjects bowing before their god-king. It was the sharp, brittle silence of predator animals sensing a shift in the wind, a scent they could not identify but which triggered ancient, buried instincts of survival. Standing before the dais, looking impossibly small against the backdrop of the massive holographic star chart that dominated the center of the room, was the creature known only as the Drifter. He was a ragged thing, wrapped in environmentally sealed fabrics that had seen the dust of 100 unprotected moons, his breathing apparatus hissing with a wet, rhythmic rattle that echoed unpleasantly in the vast space. Drifters were not a civilization in the eyes of the Ascendancy. They were scavengers, space rats, nomads who moved between the cracks of the great empires, trading secrets and salvage, never settling, never fighting, only surviving. To grant audience to such a being was beneath the dignity of a minor governor, let alone the High Exarch, yet Valen had cleared the chamber of all but his most trusted generals and advisors. The message the Drifter had brought was not a trade offer or a plea for mercy. It was a warning, and it had been delivered with a terrifying, calm certainty that had chilled Valen to his very core. The holographic chart flickered, displaying the remote, uninteresting sector of the galaxy that the Ascendancy's expansion fleets were currently approaching, a region of space designated simply as Sector 88Z, a backwater devoid of resources, strategic value, or sentient life, or so the Imperial surveyors had claimed for centuries. "You speak of a trap," Valen said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the floor plates, amplified by the acoustic architecture of the hall. "You stand before the throne of the Ascendancy, surrounded by the architects of the galaxy's greatest military triumphs, and you tell us that we have walked into a trap. Not an ambush, not a fortification, but a trap. Explain yourself, scavenger, and choose your words with the precision of a diamond cutter, for your life hangs upon their symmetry." The Drifter did not flinch. He adjusted the filtration unit at his throat, his clouded, multifaceted eyes fixed on the Exarch with an expression that looked disturbingly like pity. "It is not a trap set for you, High Exarch," the Drifter rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over stone. "That is the first mistake your generals make. You believe the universe revolves around your empire, that every sword is sharpened for your throat, that every shield is raised in fear of your wrath. The Terrans, the species you call the inhabitants of Earth, do not think of you at all. They do not know you exist in the way you know them. They have not hidden themselves to deceive you. They have hidden themselves to contain what they are." General Kruk, the supreme commander of the 3rd Expansion Armada, stepped forward, his heavy combat armor clanking against the obsidian. Kruk was a massive specimen of the warrior caste, his chitin scarred from 100 campaigns, his mandibles twitching with suppressed aggression. "Insolence," Kruk spat, his voice a grinding growl. "We have scanned their system. We have intercepted their transmissions. They are a primitive species. They burn fossil fuels. They squabble over landmasses. Their fleet, if it can even be called that, consists of chemical rockets and primitive kinetic drivers. They have barely left their own gravity well. We will sweep over them before they can even broadcast a surrender. To call this a trap is the raving of a madman. We are the Ascendancy. We do not fear primitives." The Drifter turned his head slowly to look at the general, a movement so devoid of fear that it made Kruk pause. "You have scanned what they wanted you to scan," the Drifter said softly. "You have seen the mask, my people. We travel the deep currents, we ignore borders, we drift where your sensors cannot penetrate. We passed through the Uit cloud of that system 3 cycles ago. We felt it, the density, not of matter general, but of intent. The silence of their system is not empty. It is heavy. It is the silence of a held breath before a scream. We warned you because we trade in information, and the collapse of the ascendancy would be bad for business. Chaos creates no profit, only dust. If your fleet crosses the heliopause of their star, you will trigger the containment protocols, and once triggered, the trap cannot be unset. Valen leaned forward, the golden bands on his carapace catching the light. He felt a flicker of doubt, a cold worm of unease wriggling in his gut. The ascendancy had conquered because it was cautious, because it analyzed every variable before committing its overwhelming force. But the sheer disparity in power here was laughable. The humans were nothing. Why did this scavenger's words carry such weight? It was the specificity of the fear. The drifter was not afraid of the ascendancy. He was afraid of what the ascendancy was about to wake up. You say containment protocols, Valen said, narrowing his eyes. What are they containing? A plague, a weapon? Themselves, the drifter whispered, the word hanging in the air like smoke. They are containing themselves. You see a primitive civilization. We see a cage built by the inmates to keep the galaxy safe from what they were and what they could be again. They are not hiding from you, Exarch. They are hiding from their own history, and you are about to knock on the door of the asylum and demand to speak to the warden. The grand spire trembled slightly, not from any seismic activity, but from the synchronized ignition of the sublight engines of the Armada in orbit high above. The decision had already been made cycles ago. The momentum of an empire was a difficult thing to arrest. The orders had been cut, the fleets dispatched. The drifter's warning had come, as the title of his message suggested, already too late. Valen looked at the holographic display. The leading edge of the Ascendancy's vanguard was seconds away from dropping out of warp at the edge of the Terran system. "Connect me to the vanguard," Valen ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "I want a live feed. If this is a trap, we will see it sprung. If it is a lie, you will die before the sun sets, Drifter." The central hologram shifted, zooming in on the distant star system. The visuals were reconstructed from superluminal sensor data, rendering the scene in ghostly blues and sharp reds. The Ascendancy fleet was a glorious sight, a swarm of sleek, predatory shapes, miles-long dreadnoughts bristling with plasma lances and gravity well generators, surrounded by clouds of fighter drones that moved with the coordinated grace of a flock of starlings. They dropped out of warp space with the violent, tearing sound of reality being forced open, arriving at the edge of the system with shields at full power, ready to subjugate. And then nothing happened. There were no defense platforms waiting, no minefields, no swarms of desperate defenders launching from the moons of the gas giants. The Sol system lay open, naked, quiet. The yellow star burned steadily. The blue marble of Earth spun lazily on its axis. It looked exactly as the long-range scans had predicted, a quiet, unsuspecting world unaware of its impending doom. General Kruk laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "Behold the trap, Exarch. Behold the terror, empty space and a defenseless rock." The scavenger lied. He sought to sow discord, to delay us for his own profit. Kruk turned to the guards. "Seize him." "Wait," Valen commanded, holding up a hand. He was watching the sensor readouts scrolling rapidly down the side of the display. The technicians in the pit below the dais were not celebrating. They were hunched over their consoles, their movements frantic, their antennae twitching in confusion. "Report. What are the sensors seeing?" "Hi, Exarch," a technician called out, her voice trembling slightly. We have a discrepancy. The fleet has exited warp, but they are not moving." "What do you mean, not moving?" Kruk barked. "Engines to full, advance on the third planet." "No, General, you do not understand," the technician replied, her face pale. "The engines are firing at maximum output. The readouts confirm thrust, but the fleet has zero velocity relative to the star. They are stationary." The room went deadly silent. Valen looked at the hologram. The ships were there, their engines flaring with the brilliant white light of antimatter annihilation, pouring enough energy to move a moon into the void. But they hung suspended in the blackness, pinned like eye. "NSEX on aboard." "Gravity well?" Valen asked, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. "Negative, Exarch. Local gravity is normal. It's the space itself," the technician stammered, struggling to interpret the data that defied all known physics. "The viscosity of the vacuum has changed. The Planck length, it's been altered. The space around the fleet has become rigid like amber." The drifter let out a long, shuddering breath. "The stasis of the saints," he murmured. "They didn't even deploy the fleet. They just turned the lawn sprinklers on." Open a channel to the fleet, Admiral, Valen roared, panic finally breaking through his composure. Admiral Torsen, report, what is happening? The main screen flickered, resolving into the image of the bridge of the flagship Eternal Conquest. Admiral Torsen, a veteran of the Rim Wars, looked terrified. The view behind him showed the stars, but they were unmoving, frozen in a lack of parallax. Hi, Exarch, we are trapped. The ship. The structural integrity field is buckling, not from external pressure, but from torque. We are pushing against nothing, and nothing is pushing back harder. We cannot move forward. We cannot retreat. The warp drive is unresponsive. The geometry of space here is wrong. It's flat, perfectly mathematically flat. We can't create a warp bubble because there is no curvature to manipulate. Who is doing this? Kruk shouted at the screen. Where are the emitters? Where is the enemy? There are no emitters, General, Torsen screamed, losing his military discipline. It's the whole system, the background radiation. It's shifting. It's not random noise anymore. It's music, a carrier wave. Someone is broadcasting on all frequencies, on all spectrums, from the radio to the gravimetric. Play it, Valen whispered. The audio filled the high hall. It was not a speech. It was not a threat. It was a low, harmonic hum, a complex, multitonal chord that resonated in the bones of everyone present. It was calm, terrifyingly calm. It sounded like a lullaby sung by a mountain. Then a voice cut through the hum. It was a human voice, speaking in the trade tongue of the galaxy, but with an accent that sounded archaic, formal, and immensely tired. Unidentified vessels, the voice said. It didn't sound like a soldier. It sounded like a librarian asking for quiet. You have entered a demilitarized preservation zone. Your propulsion systems are currently struggling against a local alteration of the cosmological constant. Please disengage your engines immediately, or your vessels will shear themselves apart under their own thrust. We do not wish to clean up the debris. It is tedious. Valen stared at the screen. They altered the cosmological constant locally. He looked at the drifter. That is a Class Omega civilization capability. That is the power of gods. They are not gods, the drifter said sadly. They are engineers, bored, paranoid engineers. Admiral Valen ordered, his voice shaking. Shut down the engines, do as they say. But Exarch, we will be sitting ducks, Kruk protested. We are already the ducks, General, Valen snapped. We have been ducks since we entered the system. Shut them down. On the screen, the flare of the engines died away. The Eternal Conquest hung driftless in the void. This is High Exarch Valen of the Valosian Ascendancy, Valen spoke into the comms, projecting his voice across the light years. We demand an explanation. Who are you, and how have you done this? There was a pause, a long, stretching silence that made the Valosians sweat. Then the view on the main screen changed. The bridge of the Eternal Conquest was replaced by a simple, stark white room. There was no grand throne, no displays of military might, no banners, just a wooden desk and a human male sitting behind it. He wore a simple gray tunic. He looked average, unthreatening, perhaps middle-aged by human standards, with thinning hair and glasses. He was drinking from a ceramic cup. I am Administrator Saul, the human said, setting the cup down. I manage the containment grid for this sector. As for how we did this, well, we simply increased the friction of the vacuum in your vicinity. It's a safety feature. Keeps the children from running into the street, so to speak. We are the Ascendancy, Kruk roared, unable to contain himself. We are the masters of 1,000 stars. You dare treat us like children. Administrator Saul looked at Kruk through the screen, his expression mild, almost apologetic. General, with all due respect, you arrived in our home with weapons charged. You are effectively a toddler who found a handgun. We didn't shoot you, we just engaged the safety lock. Now please state your intentions. If you are here for trade, you are in the wrong lane. If you are here for conquest. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. I really hope you aren't here for conquest. The paperwork is excruciating. Valen Fee. LT, the reality of the situation settling over him like a shroud. This was the trap. It wasn't an ambush. It was the realization that the Ascendancy was so insignificant that their invasion was being treated as a bureaucratic annoyance. We demand the surrender of your system, Valen said, trying to salvage some shred of dignity, though he knew it was futile. Your technology is impressive, but we have fleets numbering in the tens of thousands. We can blockade this system until your son dies. Administrator Saul took off his glasses and cleaned them with the hem of his tunic. High Exarch Valen, he said softly. You are assuming we are trapped in here with you. The drifter tried to warn you, didn't he? I see one of them in your chamber. Kale, isn't it? Good to see you again, old friend. The drifter bowed low. And you, administrator. The ascendancy believes we are a primitive species because we do not expand, Saul continued, putting his glasses back on. We do not colonize the galaxy. We do not build empires. We stay here on Earth and a few surrounding rocks. Have you asked yourself why? Why a species that can rewrite the laws of physics to stop a fleet in its tracks chooses to live on one wet, crowded rock? Because you are weak, Crux sneered. Because you lack the will to rule. Saul's eyes hardened. For a fraction of a second, the mild bureaucrat vanished, and something ancient, cold, and predatory looked out from behind those lenses. It was a look that made Valen recoil physically. No, Saul said, because we are the jailers. The screen split. A new image appeared alongside the administrator. It showed a view of the dark side of Earth, but it wasn't dark. It was glowing with a faint, violet lattice of energy, a web that encased the planet. And beneath the web, deep in the crust, something was pulsing. A rhythmic, dark heartbeat that didn't register on optical sensors but showed up as a terrifying void on the gravimetric scans. 10,000 years ago, Saul began, his voice taking on a lecture hall cadence, humanity conquered the galaxy. We didn't call it the ascendancy, we called it the Terran Dominion. We were enthusiastic. We broke the speed of light, we broke the energy barrier, we broke everything we touched. We were exactly like you, General Kruk, hungry, proud, stupid. The high hall was silent. This was a history unknown to the Ascendancy's archives. We expanded until we found something we couldn't shoot, Saul said. We found the Void Eaters, or rather, they found us. They don't live in normal space. They live in the substrata, the space underneath the warp. They feed on entropy, and our warp drives our weapons, our empires. We were ringing the dinner bell. They came through. They ate 300 of our colonies in a month. They don't just kill, they erase. They consume the causality of a civilization. If they eat you, you don't just die. You never existed. Valen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The Great Silence, he whispered. The archaeological anomalies in the Outer Rim, civilizations that vanished without a trace. Exactly, Saul nodded. We realized that the only way to stop them was to close the door, but the door was inside us. It was our technology, our ambition, our noise. So we made a choice. We retreated. We dismantled our empire. We consolidated our population back to Saul, and we built the cradle. He gestured to the image of the pulsing web around Earth. This isn't a planetary shield, Exarch. It's a plug. Earth sits on the primary fault line of reality where the Void Eaters broke through. We are sitting on the lid of hell, holding it shut with the weight of our own gravity and a physics engine that requires the focused mental output of 10 billion human beings to maintain. We don't expand because we can't leave our post. We are the guardians at the gate. Saul leaned into the camera. And your arrival, your massive warp signatures, your antimatter flares, you just jumped up and down on the trapdoor. A red light began to flash in the high hall. A siren, low and mournful, began to wail. Exarch, the sensor technician screamed. New contacts, massive contacts emerging from inside the fleet. Valen looked at the tactical display. The Ascendancy fleet, still frozen in the amber of static space, was suddenly surrounded by tears in reality. But these weren't clean warp rifts. They were jagged, bleeding wounds in the cosmos, oozing a darkness that was darker than space. Tendrils of shadow lashed out, grasping the hull of the Eternal Conquest. They are here, Saul said, his voice devoid of mockery now. The vibrations of your arrival woke them up. The containment grid is holding, but the local breach is widening. Your fleet is the appetizer. Help us, Valen shouted, his pride evaporating in the face of cosmic horror. If you are the guardians, then guard us. Save my ships. We cannot save your ships, Saul said grimly. They are already within the event horizon of the breach. But we can save the rest of the galaxy. We can save you if you do exactly what I say. Anything, Valen gasped. Link your targeting computers to our network, Saul commanded. Surrender command authority of your remaining reserves to the Terran defense grid. We need your firepower. Our weapons are designed to suppress, not to destroy. We need your crude, violent, explosive output to cauterize the wound. You want us to fire on our own fleet? Kruk asked, horrified. Your fleet is dead, General, Saul said brutally. The shadows are already inside, look. On the screen, the bridge of the Eternal Conquest was a scene of nightmare. The shadows had breached the hull. Crew members were dissolving into smoke. Admiral Torsen was firing his sidearm into a cloud of darkness that seemed to laugh at him. Fire, Saul ordered. Now, or the breach expands and consumes this entire sector. Valen looked at the drifter. The ragged alien nodded slowly. It is the only way, Exarch. Better to burn a limb than lose the body. Valen closed his eyes. General Kruk, order the reserves to link with the Terran network. Authorize the firing solution. Exarch. Kruk hesitated, then slumped. Yes, Exarch. The order was given. In the void, the second wave of the Ascendancy fleet, hanging back at the edge of the system, suddenly slewed around, their weapons locking onto their own brethren. At the same time, the defenseless Earth changed. The blue marble seemed to crack open. Massive spires of crystal rose from the oceans, piercing the clouds. The moon, Luna, split along its equator, revealing a core of spinning, silver machinery. Synchronizing, Saul's voice came over the speakers, calm and professional amidst the apocalypse. Targeting solution locked. Terran phase cannons charging. Ascendancy plasma drivers online. Fire. The Sol system erupted in light. It was a display of destruction such as the galaxy had never seen. The Terran weapons didn't fire beams. They fired waves of mathematical negation, erasing the coordinates of the enemy. The Ascendancy ships poured raw thermal energy into the breach. The combination of human precision and alien brute force created a firestorm that burned the fabric of space itself. The shadows screeched, a sound that was not heard but felt in the teeth and the marrow. The Void Eaters recoiled, burned by the light of a united front. The breach shuddered, then collapsed in on itself, taking the wreckage of the Vanguard fleet with it. The silence returned. But it was different now. The eternal conquest was gone. The Vanguard was dust. The Earth had retracted its spires, the moon sealing itself shut. The web around the planet glowed angry red, then slowly faded back to invisible violet. In the high hall, Valen slumped onto his throne. He felt aged, hollowed out. He had come to conquer a primitive world and had instead been used as a tool by a civilization so advanced they had turned their entire existence into a lock on a cage. Administrator Saul appeared on the screen again. He looked tired. He rubbed his temples. Breach sealed, containment stabilizing at 94%. That was close, too close. You, Valen stammered. You destroyed them, my best ships. I saved the rest of them, Saul corrected. And I saved your empire. If that breach had fully opened, the Ascendancy would have been a memory by tomorrow morning. Who are you people? Valen whispered. Truly. Saul looked at the camera and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. We are the janitors, Exarch. We clean up the messes. We hold the line. We endure. And what now? Kruk asked, his voice subdued. Do you destroy us? Do you counterattack? We don't have time for war, Saul sighed. We have a job to do. The breach weakened the grid. We have to recalibrate. It will take centuries. He looked at Valen. But we could use some help. The maintenance requirements are increasing. We need resources. We need early warning sensors in the deep void. We need friends, or at least quiet neighbors. You want an alliance? Valen asked, incredulous. After we tried to invade you. We are pragmatic, Saul said. You have a large military. You are good at blowing things up. We are good at making sure things don't blow up the wrong way. There is a synergy there, besides. The Void Eaters are not the only things in the dark, and we are getting tired of standing watch alone. The Drifter stepped forward again. The Ascendancy has always sought a purpose, Exarch. You conquered because you feared insignificance. Now you have a purpose. The universe is not a prize to be won. It is a fortress to be defended. The Terrans have held the gate for 10 millennia. Perhaps it is time to help them hold it. Valen looked at the holographic chart. The Sol system no longer looked like a backwater. It looked like the keystone of the galaxy. He looked at Saul, the unassuming man who commanded the power of gods, but chose to wear the face of a clerk. We will withdraw our fleets to the perimeter, Valen said slowly. We will establish a quarantine zone. No unauthorized vessels will approach your system. We will provide the resources you require. Thank you, Exarch, Saul said, and Valen. Yes. Don't feel too bad about the trap. It was designed to catch gods. You should be proud you survived it. The screen faded to black. The silence in the high hall was no longer heavy. It was electric. It was the silence of a room where the worldview of every being present had been shattered and reassembled in a new, terrifying yet hopeful configuration. General Kruk looked at his hands, then at the Exarch. We are not the apex, he murmured. We never were. No, Valen said, rising from his throne. He felt a strange lightness. The burden of being the absolute master was gone, replaced by the clarity of being a soldier in a much larger war. We are not the apex. We are the shield bearers, and we have just met the sword. The exarch walked to the window, looking out at the binary suns setting over his capital. He imagined the distant, small yellow star and the fragile blue world wrapping itself in silence, holding back the dark. "Send a message to the rest of the council," Valen ordered. "Tell them the conquest is over. Tell them the vigil has begun." The Valosian ascendancy had gone to Earth to find a subject. They had found a savior. And in the cold, infinite dark of the galaxy, the partnership between the arrogant empire and the tired janitors began, a partnership that would one day challenge the very stars themselves. But that is a story for another age. For now, the trap was reset. The door was closed. And for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity was not entirely alone in the dark. The weeks following the incident at Sector 88Z saw a transformation within the Valosian ascendancy that sociologists and historians would puzzle over for generations. It was not merely a shift in policy. It was a rewriting of the cultural soul. The ascendancy, for all its pomp and gold-plated brutality, was a culture that respected strength. They had found in humanity not a rival for territory, but a strength so profound it rendered the concept of territory irrelevant. High Exarch Valen found himself spending less time in the Hall of Echoes and more time in the data archives, reviewing the packet of information Administrator Saul had transmitted shortly after the fleet withdrew. It was a care package, as the humans called it, a primer on the nature of the threat they faced. The data was dense, esoteric, and terrifying. It spoke of ontological decay, of anti-life equations, of entities that were not biological but conceptual. It made the petty wars of the ascendancy look like children fighting over a toy in a burning house. One evening, deep in the cycle, Valen was summoned to the communication spire. A priority channel had been opened from Saul. It was not the administrator this time. The hologram resolved into the image of a woman. She was younger than Saul, wearing a military uniform that bore no insignia of rank, only a patch depicting a shield overlaid on a sword. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and incredibly intense. "Exarch Valen," she greeted him, her voice clipped and professional. "I am Commander Rain, head of Terran External Security. Administrator Saul handles the politics and the physics. I handle the leaks." "Leaks?" Valen asked, feeling that familiar worm of dread return. "The breach caused by your fleet was sealed," Rain said, pacing within the hologram's field of view. "But the resonance of the event echoed. We are detecting movement in the deep void. Not the void eaters, not yet, but their heralds, scavengers, things that feed on the scraps of reality." "How can we assist?" Valen asked immediately. The eagerness in his voice surprised him. He wanted to prove that the ascendancy was not just a blunderbuss, but a scalpel. "We need you to patrol the perimeter," Rain said. "We have established a buffer zone of 12 light-years around Saul. We cannot spare the ships to police it. Our energy is focused on the grid. We need the ascendancy to be the customs agent. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out, especially not the probes from the Zargoth." Valen stiffened. The Zargoth were a rival empire, a hive-mind species that consumed organic matter to fuel their biotechnology. They were the ascendancy's oldest enemy. "The Zargoth are relentless," Valen warned, "if they sense weakness." "They won't sense weakness," Rain cut in with a cold smile. "They will sense you, and they will sense us standing behind you. We are transferring some upgrades for your sensor suites. You will be able to see the substrata now. You will see the shadows." "Upgrades?" Valen blinked. "You are sharing technology." "We are lending you a flashlight," Rain corrected. "Don't drop it, the data pack." "Ket is uploading now." Rain out. The connection severed, Valen turned to his technicians. "Did we receive it?" "Yes, Exarch," the chief engineer gasped, looking at his console. "By the ancestors, the coding. It's beautiful, it's recursive. It's rewriting our sensor algorithms in real time. Efficiency is up 400%. "Implement it across the fleet," Valen ordered. "And mobilize the 2nd and 4th armadas. Set course for the perimeter. If the Zargoth want to poke the bear, they will find the tiger guarding its cage." The integration of Terran algorithms into Valosian hardware was not seamless, but the results were staggering. Ships that once relied on crude radar and thermal imaging now saw the universe in a spectrum of gravity and probability. They could see the wake of a ship hours after it had passed. They could see the stress fractures in reality. It was 2 months later when the test came. A Zargoth scout flotilla, biological ships that looked like massive, fleshy squids, drifted into the edge of the perimeter. They were hunting, probing for the source of the energy spike that had occurred during the incident. Captain Herc of the Valosian cruiser Silent Vigil, formerly the Fist of Dominance, watched them on his new display. The Terran upgrade showed the Zargoth ships not just as physical objects, but as biological stains on the fabric of space. "They are crossing the red line," his tactical officer reported. "They are hailing us, demand for surrender." Herc smiled. It was the smile of a man who held a royal flush in a game of cards. "Open a channel." The screen showed the writhing, wet visage of the Zargoth brood leader. "Valosian meat," the creature hissed. "You stand in our feeding ground, move or be consumed." "This is Captain Herc of the Terran Valosian Joint Task Force," Herc said, savoring the new title. "You have entered a Class 1 containment zone. You are in violation of galactic safety protocols. Depart immediately." "Terran," the brood leader gurgled. "We know no Terran, we know only hunger. We will feast on your crew." The Zargoth ship surged forward, launching acidic spores. "Engage," Herc said calmly. The Silent Vigil did not fire plasma. It fired a weapon based on the schematics Saul had provided, a kinetic dampener. It was a watered-down version of the weapon that had stopped the Ascendancy fleet. A beam of pale blue light struck the lead Zargoth ship. There was no explosion. The ship simply stopped. Its biological momentum was canceled. The crew inside, subjected to instant inertia negation, were turned to jelly against the bulkheads. The ship drifted, dead and gray. The other Zargoth ships scattered in confusion. "Warning shot delivered," Herc broadcasted. "Next volley will target your molecular bonds. Run." They ran. For the first time in history, a Zargoth hunting pack fled without taking a bite. Back in the high hall, Valen watched the report with deep satisfaction. He looked at the Drifter, who was now a permanent fixture at court, serving as the liaison between the Empire and the Earth. "They ran," Valen said. "They actually ran." "Fear is a powerful motivator," the Drifter agreed. "But respect is a stronger one. You are earning theirs, and more importantly, you are earning ours." "Ours?" Valen asked. "The Drifters," Kale said. "We go everywhere, we see everything, we talk. The word is spreading, Exarch. The Valosians are no longer tyrants. They are the guardians. Smaller worlds are petitioning for your protection, not to be conquered, but to be shielded." Valen sat back, stunned. The Ascendancy had spent millennia trying to force the galaxy to bow. Now, by serving a greater power, by protecting a sleeping giant, they were being given the leadership they had always craved. "Paradox," Valen mused. "By serving we rule." "The Terrans have a saying," the Drifter said, his eyes twinkling. "The meek shall inherit the earth." I don't think they meant it literally, considering their firepower. But the sentiment holds. True power is control, control over oneself. The peace lasted for 3 years. It was a golden age for the Ascendancy. The technology transfers from Earth, though slow and carefully vetted, revolutionized their society. Medical tech extended lifespans. Energy tech cleaned their atmosphere. The Valosians began to look at the humans not with fear, but with a reverence bordering on religious. The silent gods of Saul became a cultural motif. But the universe does not tolerate static systems. The signal came from deep space, not from the Zargoth, not from the Drifters. It came from outside the galaxy. It was detected first by the Terran grid, then instantly relayed to the Valosian High Command. Valen was woken from his sleep cycle by the red alert klaxons. He rushed to the war room to find Administrator Saul already on the screen. Saul looked haggard. He hadn't slept in days. "It's happening," Saul said without preamble. "The Void Eaters took the bait." "The bait?" Valen asked, confused. "I thought Earth was the trap." "Earth was the lock," Saul corrected. "The bait was the signal we let escape during your invasion. We let a sliver of the frequency leak out. We needed to draw them out of the substrata." You summoned them?" Valen was horrified. "Why?" "Because we found their nest." Commander Rain appeared next to Saul. "We can't just defend anymore. We have to end this. We have to strike the subspace hive." "That is suicide," Valen whispered. "No," Saul said. "It's a hunt, and we need the hounds." "Us?" Valen asked. "You," Saul nodded. "The Terran fleet is designed for defense. It's heavy, slow, immovable. We can hold the door open, but we need someone fast, agile, and aggressive to go through it and deliver the payload." We need the ascendancy. Valen looked at the tactical map. A rift was opening at the edge of the galaxy. It was massive. If we go in there, Valen said, into the substrata, will we come back? I don't know, Saul admitted. The physics in there are fluid, but if you don't go, eventually they will eat through the door, and then there will be no coming back for anyone. Valen looked at his generals. Kruk was there. Herc was there. They didn't look afraid. They looked ready. They had been training for 3 years with the new tech. They were no longer bullies. They were warriors. We will go, Valen said. Good, Saul said. We are dropping the concealment grid. We are going to shine a light so bright they won't be able to look away. When they surge towards Earth, you flank them. You dive into the rift. You find the Queen Node, and you detonate the device we are teleporting to your flagship now. A shimmer of light appeared on the dais. A small, black cube materialized. It hummed with the same terrifying silence as the Sol system. What is it? Valen asked. A condensed vacuum state, Saul said. A reality anchor. If you set it off inside their dimension, it will impose strict Newtonian physics on their chaotic realm. It will freeze them solid. We will be freezing hell, Kruk grunted. I like it. The operation began. The Terran grid dropped. Earth shone like a beacon in the psychic spectrum. The rift tore open, and the Void Eaters spilled out, nightmarish shapes of shadow and teeth defying geometry. The Terran stationary defenses opened fire. It was a wall of light. But the Valosian fleet, the Hounds, did not engage. They ran silent, cloaked in the new stealth fields. They slipped past the battle, straight into the maw of the rift. The transition was agonizing. Valen felt his mind stretching, his memories leaking out. But the Terran mental shielding held. They emerged into a realm of swirling purple chaos. There were no stars, only hungry eyes in the dark. Target the center, Valen roared. The node there. A massive, writhing structure of anti-light loomed in the chaos, the Queen Node. The fleet fought their way through. Valosian ships burned, their crews screaming as they were unmade. But they pushed on. The Eternal Conquest II, Valen's new flagship, rammed through the final barrier. Deploy the anchor. The black cube was launched. It spiraled into the heart of the chaos. Detonate. The flash was not light, it was order. A wave of perfect crystalline geometry expanded from the cube. Where it touched the chaos hardened. The writhing shadows turned to stone. The purple sky turned to black vacuum. The screams of the Void Eaters were cut off. They had imposed reality on a dream. The fleet turned and burned for the exit. The rift was closing, sealing up as the new physics took hold. They burst back into real space, their hulls smoking, their minds reeling. Behind them, the rift solidified into a massive, inert crystal shard floating in space, a monument to the war. Saul was on the screen, he was weeping. You did it, it's done, the pressure, it's gone, the grid is silent. Valen looked at the crystal shard. Is it over? The war is over, Saul said. Now comes the hard part. Which is? Living with the peace, Saul smiled through his tears. Welcome to the Galactic Council, High Counselor Valen. We have a lot of work to do. And so the ascendancy ended and the alliance began. The trap had been sprung, but it had caught the monsters, not the travelers. Humanity, the sleeping giant, had finally woken up not to conquer but to build. And standing beside them, their shields interlocked, were the Valosians, no longer the masters of the galaxy but its proudest guardians. The universe was vast, dark, and full of terrors. But as Valen looked at the blue pearl of Earth on his screen, he knew one thing for certain. They would never be afraid of the dark again, because now they were the ones holding the light.